What if I told you that 6 months from today, you could wake up in a completely different body with a radically clearer mind, living a life that feels intentional, focused, and deeply aligned? I don't mean some distant, vague version of yourself. I mean you reorganized, recalibrated, rebuilt because you decided to give yourself permission to change, because you refused to settle for the version of yourself that was surviving instead of leading, thriving instead of numbing. Science has shown us something profound. The human brain is designed to change, not just in youth, but across your lifespan. It's called neuroplasticity. And here's the truth most people never get taught. Your brain responds directly to what you repeat with focus. That means every thought, every breath, every morning routine, every workout, every act of courage. They're not just actions. They're votes for your future identity. They're reshaping your circuitry. But it doesn't start with a grand revelation. It starts with today's repetition. Change happens when you stop waiting for the perfect mood and start taking action. Your nervous system doesn't care how you feel in the moment. It adapts to what you do consistently. That's powerful. That means you're not stuck. You're simply rehearsing the wrong patterns. But here's the divine paradox. Transformation requires stress, not the toxic, chaotic kind, the intentional kind, the kind that says, I will wake up early. I will breathe through discomfort. I will train my body even when it's hard. I will fast. I will learn. I will say no to the things that deplete me and yes to the actions that forge me. Because stress in small and controlled doses is the catalyst. It's the trigger for growth. Your body was designed to get stronger when challenged. Your mind was built to become clearer when it learns to regulate chaos. So don't run from the friction. Embrace it. Use it. Start aligning your life with rhythm. Get the light in your eyes first thing in the morning. Go to sleep on time. Eat in alignment with your biology. Protect your dopamine. These are not just wellness hacks. They are foundational principles for clarity, creativity, and control. And listen, this is not just about self-optimization. This is about sacred responsibility. You are not just here to exist. You're here to respond. To become the kind of person who can carry purpose without breaking. To build habits that make you reliable to your mission. Because this isn't just neuroscience. This is divine design. The breath in your lungs is proof that you are still called to grow. The pain in your story is not your prison, it's your portal. The battle you are facing right now is the resistance required to build the version of you that is worthy of the calling that awaits. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change itself structurally, chemically, and functionally through experience. It's not a concept reserved for children or only useful in recovery from injury. It is a dynamic and ongoing process available to every human being across the lifespan. But the way neuroplasticity works is not random. It follows specific rules, and one of the most important is that repetition matters. In fact, repetition, when combined with focused attention, accelerates neural rewiring at a rate far greater than people imagine. When you engage in a specific behavior, thought pattern, or skill repeatedly, neurons that are associated with those actions begin to fire together. The principle in neurons that fire together, wire together, is foundational here. Over time, the connections between those neurons strengthen, creating what's called long-term potentiation. This is the biological basis for learning and habit formation. But here's what most people overlook. The brain doesn't just respond to passive repetition. It responds most intensely when that repetition is paired with attention, emotion, and intention. That's why a focused repetition is so powerful. Let's take an example. Learning to play a musical instrument. Mindlessly running through scales or songs with distractions in the background will not lead to deep mastery, but 30 minutes of intentional, focused practice where the mind is fully engaged and tracking improvement can lead to rapid synaptic strengthening. The same principle applies to mental habits, emotional regulation, physical training, or even shifting self-identity. Focus is the accelerator of neuroplastic change. The brain has an internal gating mechanism that determines when it should change. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. The brain wants to preserve energy and only remodel circuits when it receives strong evidence that a change is necessary. Focus acts as that signal. It tells the brain, and this matters, pay attention, allocate resources. The more focused you are during an activity, the more neurochemicals like acetylcholine and dopamine are released into specific brain regions. enhancing the brain's ability to reorganize. That's why it's entirely possible to change deeply rooted habits, thought patterns, or physical capacities in as little as 6 months. When you apply repetition to the right behavior and pair it with deep focus and consistency, the changes start to compound. The early days are often the hardest, not because your brain is resisting change, but because the old pathways are still stronger than the new ones. But each focused repetition weakens the old and strengthens the new. And after a few weeks, something remarkable happens. Momentum. Momentum in the brain isn't just psychological, it's biological. The newly formed neural circuits become more efficient. Signals travel faster. Fewer resources are required to execute the new behavior. What felt like effort becomes automatic. That's the moment when transformation becomes sustainable. This is also why distractions are so costly. Each time your focus is fractured, the signal to your brain weakens. It's as if you were trying to carve a groove into stone, but each strike barely hits the same spot. Shallow, scattered effort leads to shallow, scattered results. But deep, repeated strikes, focused repetition, creates a groove so strong it reshapes the landscape of your brain. Sleep, nutrition, and recovery also play critical roles in this process. Most of the rewiring takes place during rest, especially in deep sleep. During this time, the brain replays important activities from the day, consolidating them into long-term memory. So if you engage in focused practice and then sleep well, your brain continues to learn even while you rest. The beauty of this system is that it doesn't care where you're starting from. The brain isn't interested in your past limitations. It's responding to your present focus. Whether you're trying to build discipline, learn a language, overcome anxiety, or develop resilience, the tools are already inside you. Repetition with focus is the key to unlocking them. Deliberate daily action is the most reliable driver of long-term transformation because it doesn't rely on how you feel. It relies on what you do. Motivation, while useful when present, is inherently unstable. It fluctuates with mood, external circumstances, and energy levels. Some days you feel inspired, other days you don't. But action taken deliberately with structure and intention cuts through the volatility of motivation and delivers results through consistency. The brain doesn't need you to feel like doing something in order to benefit from it. Neurobiologically, every action sends a signal. When you take a step, whether it's a workout, reading a page, or getting out of bed early, you're reinforcing a neural pattern. Over time, those patterns become pathways, and those pathways become habits. This is how identity shifts who, how, them. Not through sudden inspiration, but through repeated behaviors that align with the kind of person you want to become. There's a common misconception that successful people are constantly motivated. The reality is they have systems. They act according to protocol, not preference. Deliberate action means you choose the behavior in advance. You create conditions that make that behavior more likely. You don't wait until 6 a.m. to decide whether you'll train. You've already removed friction the night before by laying out your shoes, planning your workout, and defining your workout. This removes the emotional debate and places the emphasis on execution. Behavioral science shows that habits form fastest when actions are simple, repeatable, and anchored to existing routines. But the deeper shift happens when those habits are chosen with intention. Deliberate daily action doesn't mean doing random tasks. It means choosing a set of behaviors that serve a larger vision and repeating them even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. That's when the nervous system begins to adapt. That's when your dopamine system starts to respond more to effort than outcome. That's when discipline is built. Motivation can be deceptive because it often masquerades as progress. Watching a motivational video, reading a quote, or feeling hyped about a new idea can give you a brief dopamine spike. It feels productive, but without action, nothing changes. Deliberate daily action, in contrast, may feel unglamorous, even boring at times, but it produces results you can measure. You don't need to feel inspired to do 10 minutes of meditation. You just need to do it. And when you do, the benefits accumulate whether you felt like it or not. This is also why tracking your behaviors matters. Writing down what you did each day, even briefly, engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and goal-directed behavior. Tracking reinforces awareness, and what you're aware of you can improve. Over time, This creates a feedback loop. You act, you track, you reflect, you adjust. That cycle, repeated daily, builds mastery far more effectively than waiting for the right mood, Another key insight is that deliberate action teaches your brain that you are in control. When you act in alignment with your goals despite discomfort, you're building what's called top-down control, training your higher order thinking centers to override primitive urges. This is a foundational skill for emotional regulation, resilience, and leadership. It makes you more grounded, less reactive, and far more capable of following through on your purpose, even when life gets chaotic. Deliberate daily action is also scalable. If you're burned out or pressed for time, you don't have to do everything. You just have to do something. A 5-minute workout, cold shower, a few pages of reading. The point isn't perfection. It's consistency. Each act, no matter how small, is a vote for your future. These are the bricks that build identity. In the end, what separates those who transform from those who stay stuck is not motivation. It's action, repeated with intention. The circadian rhythm is the body's internal 24-hour clock that governs nearly every physiological process, from sleep and hormone release to energy levels, cognition, and even emotional regulation. Aligning your daily behavior with this rhythm isn't just a matter of health, it's a matter of discipline. When your actions are synchronized with your biology, discipline becomes easier to access and more sustainable over time. The reason most people struggle with consistency and focus isn't because they lack willpower. It's because they're constantly fighting against their own biology. Your brain and body operate in predictable cycles that are guided by light and darkness. At sunrise, natural light hits specialized cells in your eyes that send signals to the brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This signal tells your body it's time to be alert, to elevate cortisol in healthy amounts, and to suppress melatonin, the sleep hormone. This is what sets your circadian rhythm for the day. Missing this early light exposure by staying indoors, waking late, or scrolling in the dark throws your internal clock off balance. And when that happens, everything else becomes harder. Discipline starts with how you wake up. Getting sunlight in your eyes within the first hour of waking anchors your circadian rhythm and boosts your ability to focus. It increases your dopamine baseline, giving you more drive and motivation throughout the day. It sets the timing for hormone release, body temperature, and mental acuity. When you delay or disrupt this input, you may still get through your day, but it will require more effort, more resistance, and more willpower. Over time, that's unsustainable. Sleep is another pillar that flows directly from circadian alignment. The brain consolidates memory, regulates emotions, and resets the nervous system during deep and REM sleep, both of which are influenced by when you fall asleep and the quality of your light exposure during the day. Eating young, going to sleep and waking up at inconsistent times, especially with excessive artificial light at night, confuses the body's rhythms and makes it harder to fall asleep naturally. Poor sleep leads to impaired decision-making, reduced willpower, and elevated cravings the next day. This becomes a vicious cycle where you're always catching up instead of moving forward with clarity. Most people attempt to build discipline on top of broken sleep, erratic energy patterns, and disrupted circadian signals. That's like trying to construct a building on a cracked foundation. So the body needs rhythm to function efficiently. That rhythm creates predictability, and predictability creates ease. When your biology is regulated, tasks that once felt difficult, like working out, meditating, eating clean, or focusing deeply, become less effort. It's not that they become easy, it's that your nervous system is no longer working against itself. Meal timing, exercise, and even emotional processing are all influenced by your circadian cycle. Eating late at night disrupts sleep quality. Exercising at the wrong times can spike cortisol instead of helping you manage it. Even creative output follows a rhythm. Most people experience peak alertness in the mid-morning and a second wave in the early evening. Understanding and aligning with these natural peaks allows you to schedule your most important work at times when your brain is primed to perform. This isn't about becoming rigid or robotic. It's about honoring the system you were born with. The more your daily actions align with your circadian rhythm, the less friction you experience. That reduction in friction is what allows discipline to thrive. You no longer have to force yourself into productivity. You flow into it, supported by your biology. True discipline isn't just about mental toughness. It's about creating conditions where the mind and body are working together, not at odds. Circadian alignment is the invisible structure that supports consistency, focus, and energy. When you build your routines around it, you don't just become more productive. You become more stable, more clear, and more capable of sustaining the habits that shape the person you are becoming. In the pursuit of transformation, people often overestimate what can be achieved in a short burst of effort and underestimate the power of small, consistent inputs over time. The nervous system, like all intelligent systems, adapts gradually but profoundly. Tiny intentional actions, done consistently and with purpose, can yield results far greater than their initial effort suggests. This is the power of compound effect applied to biology and behavior. Small inputs, massive returns. The body and brain are always listening. Every action you take, no matter how minor it seems, sends a signal to your nervous system. These signals may not appear to create instant change, but over time, they build new neural pathways, shift your neurochemistry, and shape your identity. A 2-minute cold shower, a single deep breath, 5 minutes of journaling, or a brief walk outside in the morning, all of these might seem insignificant in isolation, but done daily, they change the architecture of your brain. They train your physiology to respond differently to stress, to recover faster, to focus more sharply. Take the simple act of breath work. A few minutes of controlled breathing, especially exhale-emphasized patterns, can downshift the nervous system from a sympathetic fight or flight state into a parasympathetic rest and regulate mode. This isn't abstract. It's a measurable, immediate shift in heart rate variability, blood pressure, and cognitive flexibility. When practiced regularly, it trains the body to regulate its own arousal levels, making you more resilient under pressure. A tiny action with disproportionate impact. Same applies to nutrition. Choosing one nutrient-dense meal each day, something as simple as a high-protein breakfast or eliminating ultra-processed foods in the evening, can shift your metabolic stability, influence your insulin response, and affect your sleep quality. These small adjustments compound in their effect on energy, mood, and mental clarity. Over weeks and months, they move the needle far more than one-off extreme diets or unsustainable regimens. Habits of the mind follow the same principle. Taking just a few moments each day to reflect, to journal, or to consciously reframe a negative thought pattern teaches the brain to change its default interpretations. Neuroplasticity doesn't require hours. It requires precision and repetition. Even brief moments of gratitude, when practiced consistently, can increase serotonin and shift the lens through which your brain views the world. What starts as a 2-minute exercise becomes a permanent upgrade in baseline emotional state. Movement is another area where small inputs yield exponential returns. You don't need to train for hours to get stronger or more mobile. Microdoses of movement, stretching, posture correction, short walks signal to your musculoskeletal and nervous systems that movement is a part of your identity. Over time, these inputs prevent injury, improve blood flow to the brain, and enhance neurochemical balance. Even a single set of push-ups daily activates signaling pathways that encourage adaptation, strength gain, and metabolic health. The reason these small inputs are so powerful is because they bypass resistance. They're accessible. They don't require monumental motivation or massive lifestyle overhauls. And because they are easy to do, they are also easy to repeat. Repetition is what makes the nervous system pay attention. When repeated with intention, even small actions are interpreted by the brain as valuable, and value leads to lasting rewiring. What emerges from these micro practices is not just improvement in performance, health, or mindset, but a deeper transformation of self-perception. You begin to see yourself as someone who is consistent, someone who honors their well-being, someone who takes action even when it's inconvenient. That shift in identity is the foundation for larger changes down the road. In the end, the key is not to wait for massive opportunities or bursts of motivation. It's to recognize that the most profound shifts come from stacking tiny wins. You control the inputs. And when those inputs are deliberate, aligned, and consistent, the returns are not only massive, they are inevitable. Pain and challenge are not obstacles to avoid. They are the very conditions through which deep transformation becomes possible. The human nervous system is built to adapt, to grow, and to reorganize itself in response to stress. But not just any stress, targeted, intentional, and meaningful stress that signals to the brain and body. Change is required here. This is how the greatest shifts in character, behavior, and biology occur. Not in the absence of discomfort, but directly through it. The nervous system does not evolve in stillness and ease. It responds to friction. When you expose yourself to challenge, whether that's physical strain, emotional discomfort, or psychological tension, you activate systems designed for adaptation. Hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine surge not as punishment, but as preparation. Your body becomes alert. Your brain becomes plastic, ready to rewire, ready to learn. The pain you feel is not just a signal of difficulty. It's the signal that your system is entering a window of opportunity for growth. But this only works if you approach pain and challenge deliberately. Avoidance sends the opposite signal. Every time you retreat from a difficult conversation, skip a workout, or numb discomfort with distractions, your brain gets the message that stress is a threat to be escaped, not a stimulus to be embraced. Over time, this reduces your resilience. You become less capable of managing life's inevitable stressors, not because you're weak, but because you've trained your system to retreat rather than rise. Transformation happens when you reverse this cycle. When you step into challenge and allow pain to become your teacher, your nervous system adapts upward. This doesn't mean seeking chaos or masochism. It means recognizing that the precise moment you feel discomfort is the moment your mind and body most open to change. Whether it's pushing through the last few seconds of a cold plunge, holding focus during mental fatigue, or facing internal fears, each of these challenges creates a spike in stress that, when met with courage and consistency, forces your system to rewire itself in response. Cold exposure is a clear example. In the first 30 seconds, your body screams to escape. But if you regulate your breath and remain still, you train your mind to override the impulse to run. You are not just enduring discomfort, you are literally changing the circuits that govern fear, impulse control, and attention. That moment of pain is a portal. When repeated regularly, you don't just get better at cold exposure, you get better at handling life. And the same principle applies to emotional pain. Facing grief, loss, shame, or failure without suppression builds inner strength. The brain learns that it can survive difficulty without collapsing. This doesn't numb emotion, it integrates it. True resilience isn't the absence of pain, it's the capacity to remain grounded in the middle of it. Pain is data. It reveals where healing is needed, where growth is possible, and where patterns must be broken. The transformation doesn't come from the challenge alone. It comes from how you meet it. If you bring intention, presence, and consistency to the moments of discomfort, they become sculptors of your nervous system. The more you practice this, the faster your brain learns. Stress is not danger. It's a signal for evolution. This is why growth requires tension. Muscles grow by tearing and repairing. Neural pathways strengthen through use and struggle. Character forms through trial and testing. The challenge doesn't block the path, it is the path. And pain, when approached with clarity, becomes a compass pointing to where the next level of you lives. Transformation is not something that happens to you. It's something you earn, one deliberate encounter with discomfort at a time. Pain and challenge aren't the end of the story. They are the beginning of a new one. Lasting change does not happen in a single moment of insight or a burst of inspiration. It happens slowly, quietly, and with repetition. While revelations can spark the desire for transformation, they rarely deliver the change itself. That work belongs to repetition. The way you see yourself and how your brain encodes your behavior is formed and reformed through the actions you take repeatedly, not through what you suddenly understand or feel motivated to do. The nervous system doesn't respond to intention alone. It responds to patterns alone. Every time you act in a certain way, wake up early, choose a healthy meal, resist a distraction, speak with honesty, you cast a vote for the type of person you are becoming. The brain notices patterns more than promises. It is always asking, what do you do consistently? And based on that answer, it shapes your internal self-image. When someone says, I'm not a disciplined person, or I'm not good at staying focused, they are usually speaking from a history of repeated behaviors that reinforce that belief. But that identity is not fixed. It is plastic, like the brain itself. You can change it, but only by showing up repeatedly in a new way. Each repetition rewires neural circuits. Over time, what was once difficult becomes automatic. You no longer have to try to be the new version of yourself. You simply are. This is why discipline, habits, and daily routines matter far more than sudden bursts of motivation. They provide the structure your brain needs to reinforce new pathways. If you meditate once after a deep insight, your brain may register a novel experience. But if you meditate every morning for 30 days, your brain begins to treat that as a part of your identity. The frontal cortex becomes more efficient at initiating that behavior. The emotional centers of the brain begin to expect it. It becomes who you are, not just something you occasionally do. Many people chase clarity through books, seminars, or inspirational content. These can be helpful, but they are often overvalued. Insight is the beginning, not the answer. A revelation might open your eyes to what's possible, but it doesn't create the new pathways needed to make that possibility real. That requires doing the work daily, without needing to feel ready, without waiting for motivation to arrive. In neuroscience, there's a principle called a self-directed plasticity. This refers to the brain's ability to reshape itself in response to behaviors you consciously choose. If you intentionally direct your attention and effort toward a certain goal and repeat the necessary actions, the brain changes in that direction, but it requires repetition. The brain will not allocate energy and resources to a pattern that is inconsistent or rarely used. Repetition tells your nervous system this matters. And when it matters, change happens. This also applies to the emotional side of identity. If you want to stop identifying as someone who gives up easily or someone who lacks confidence, you can't just tell yourself a new story. You must live the new story day by day. Confidence doesn't arrive first. It is built through repeated acts of courage. Resilience isn't something you wait for. It's something you practice every time you get back up after being knocked down. Identity follows behavior, not the other way around. You don't need to feel different to act differently. The act itself is what makes you different. That's where transformation hides, not in the insight, but in the repetition of choices that align with who you are becoming. The brain takes note of patterns, not declarations. Every time you act in integrity with your future self, you become more like them. Not in theory, but in structure, chemistry, and belief. You show your brain who you are through what you do again and again. That is how identity changes, through repetition, not revelation. True growth, the kind that lasts, that reshapes your habits, your character, and your destiny, requires more than just discipline or strategy. It requires spiritual alignment. When your actions are grounded in a deeper sense of meaning and anchored to values that transcend the immediate, growth stops being something you have to force. It becomes something that flows. Sustainable transformation doesn't come from intensity alone. It comes from integrity, being aligned in thought, word, and deed with something greater than your momentary desires. The nervous system is wired not only for survival, but for purpose. Purpose gives structure to effort. When you know why you are doing something at a core level, when your choices reflect your highest values instead of your lowest impulses, the friction of daily action reduces. You stop negotiating with yourself about whether it's worth it to wake up early, to train, to reflect, to serve others. You already decided, not out of pressure, but from clarity. That clarity is spiritual in nature. It answers the question, what am I really building and who am I building it for? When your growth is rooted in spiritual alignment, it is less vulnerable to burnout, distraction, or ego-driven detours. You are no longer trying to become something just to prove your worth. You're not driven by fear of failure or the need for validation. You're growing because it's who you're called to become. That calling, whether you name it God, truth, purpose, or something else, is the compass that keeps you oriented when life becomes difficult. It's the still point that steadies you amid chaos. Without spiritual alignment, it's easy to get lost in superficial metrics. How much money you're making, how many followers you have, how productive you were today. But none of these will satisfy if they are disconnected from meaning. They're noise without signal. Spiritual alignment gives signal. It turns everyday effort into sacred practice. The workout isn't just for the body. It becomes a commitment to honoring the vessel you are given. The conversation isn't just words. It becomes an opportunity to speak with integrity and bring light to someone's life. The discipline isn't about control. It's about aligning your behavior with who you believe you're called to be. Sustainable growth also requires internal coherence. The body and mind function best when there is unity. When your external life reflects your internal values, your nervous system enters a more stable state. You experience less anxiety, less chronic stress, and more energy for meaningful work. This is not simply psychological, it's physiological. When the prefrontal cortex and limbic system are aligned, when your logical brain and emotional brain are working together, you're in a state where real learning and change can happen. That's the fruit of spiritual coherence. Growth that is not spiritually rooted often leads to comparison, to envy, to chasing shadows. You adopt other people's goals, live by external timelines, and lose your center. But when your growth is grounded in spiritual truth, you don't have to look sideways. You measure yourself by a higher standard, not competition, but contribution. You ask, am I becoming more honest, more courageous, more generous? These are not goals that expire. They are pathways that deepen. Spiritual alignment is not about religion. It's about relationship. Your relationship with meaning, with truth, with the person you're becoming. When that relationship is alive and active, growth becomes sustainable because it is fed from within. You don't need to rely solely on motivation or dopamine spikes. You are fueled by something deeper, conviction. And that conviction is what will carry you through resistance. When the body is tired and the mind is foggy, spiritual alignment reminds you, this matters. Not because the world is watching, but because your soul is. When your growth is rooted in something eternal, the temporary setbacks don't shake you. You keep going, not just to become more, but to become whole. That's what sustainable growth really is. Not constant acceleration, but consistent return to alignment over and over again. Change does not come from waiting. It does not arrive by accident, nor is it granted to the lucky or the gifted. It is earned through intention, through repetition, through a relentless return to what matters most. Every choice you make is a vote for the person you are becoming. When your actions are aligned with your biology, your habits, and your spirit, transformation is not only possible, it becomes inevitable. The road is not easy, but it is precise. 6 months of deliberate, aligned, and spiritually grounded effort can alter the entire trajectory of your life. Not because you discovered something new, but because you finally lived as if what you already knew was true. Begin today, not for a result, but to reclaim your responsibility, your identity, and your purpose. That's where real change begins. Not in the external shift, but in the moment you decide, I will not be the same person 6 months from now because I am no longer willing to be who I was